Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
The first thing I noticed wasn't the suitcase by the front door. It was how Julia had positioned it. Perfectly centered on the welcome mat, handle facing out, like she'd practiced the placement. My wife always did have a flair for the dramatic. "You can't stay here anymore, David." Her voice carried that particular tone she reserved for returning defective merchandise. Cool, final, with just enough disgust to make her point clear. I stood there in my work coveralls, still smelling like motor oil and honest labor, watching my wife of 12 years deliver what felt like a prepared speech. The porch light cast shadows across her face, making her look like a stranger. Maybe that's what she'd become. Mind telling me why? I asked, though something in my gut already knew this wasn't going to be a rational conversation. "Melissa told me what you did." Julia crossed her arms, that defensive posture she'd perfected during our marriage. "At the barbecue last night. How you cornered her in the kitchen, how you touched her." Melissa. Of course it was Melissa. Melissa Hartwell, Julia's best friend since college, lived in the kind of house that screamed, "Look at me," from 3 blocks away. Columns, circular driveway, lawn so perfect it looked painted. She'd married money, spent it like water, and somehow convinced half the neighborhood that her opinion mattered more than oxygen. "That's interesting," I said, keeping my voice level. "Considering I spent most of that barbecue fixing your friend's garbage disposal. You know, the one that's been broken for 3 weeks because her husband, Ethan, can't tell a wrench from a spatula." "Don't lie to me, David." Melissa was crying when she told me. Crying. Julia's voice cracked slightly, but I could see the steel underneath. She'd already made up her mind. "And you believed her." Just like that. "She's my best friend. She has no reason to lie." I almost laughed. Melissa Hartwell had more reasons to lie than a politician during election season. But pointing that out would only make Julia dig in deeper. My wife had this talent for backing the wrong horse and then riding it straight off a cliff, rather than admit she'd made a mistake. "Fine." I picked up the suitcase. It was heavier than expected. She'd actually packed my things. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. The front door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. I stood there for a moment, listening to the rain start up again, feeling the weight of Mrs. Krantz's stare from her kitchen window across the street. That old woman collected neighborhood gossip like some people collected stamps. My truck started on the second try, which felt like a small victory. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of movement in the living room window. 2 silhouettes close together. Julia and Melissa, no doubt dissecting every detail of this little performance. I drove toward downtown, past the empty storefronts and the old factory that had been under renovation for 5 years. This town had a way of making everything look tired, including the people who lived here. Maybe especially the people. The rusty anchor sat at the corner of Main and 3rd, its neon sign flickering like a dying heartbeat. I'd been coming here since I turned 21, back when the bartender was old Pete instead of his daughter, Karen. The place never changed. Sticky floors, dim lighting, and the kind of atmosphere that made everyone's problems seem smaller after a few drinks. "David," Karen looked up from wiping down glasses. "Little early for you, isn't it?" "Special occasion." I set the suitcase down by the bar and ordered a whiskey. "My wife just threw me out." "Ah, hell, what'd you do?" "Nothing, that's the problem." Karen poured the drink and slid it across the scarred wooden bar. She'd heard enough sob stories over the years to know when to talk and when to just listen. Tonight felt like a listening night. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the contacts until I found Frank Morrison's number. Frank and I went way back. High school, a few years in the Army, and now he ran a private investigation business out of a strip mall office between a tax preparer and a nail salon. If anyone could help me figure out what was really going on, it was Frank. "Morrison Investigations." His voice sounded tired. "Frank, it's David. I need a favor." "Jesus, Dave. It's almost 9 o'clock. Can't this wait until—" "My wife just kicked me out. Says I made a pass at her best friend. I need to know what's really happening here." A pause. Frank had been married and divorced twice. He understood the particular kind of crazy that came with domestic disputes. "Meet me at the office tomorrow morning. 8 sharp." "And Dave?" Don't do anything stupid tonight. Too late for that advice. I was already planning something that probably qualified as stupid, but felt absolutely necessary. The rain had stopped by the time I left the bar. I drove past my house, former house, and saw that the lights were still on. Julia's car in the driveway, but also Ethan's silver BMW. Interesting. Melissa's husband consoling my wife. How neighborly of him. I parked 3 blocks away and walked back, staying in the shadows. The living room curtains were open just enough to see inside. Julia sat on the couch, Ethan beside her with his arm around her shoulders. Melissa was nowhere to be seen. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter Emma, away at college. Mom says you're staying somewhere else for a while. Everything okay? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just some grown-up stuff to work out." Lies came so easily when you were trying to protect someone. I walked back to my truck past Melissa's house with its perfect lawn and pretentious columns. Her mailbox stood at attention by the curb, one of those expensive wooden affairs with hand-painted numbers. It would be a shame if something happened to it. The baseball bat in my truck bed had been there since Emma's high school softball season. She'd been pretty good, made varsity as a sophomore. Taught her to keep her eye on the ball and follow through with her swing. Good advice for a lot of situations. The mailbox exploded in a shower of splinters and brass numbers. One swing clean and efficient. The sound echoed through the quiet neighborhood like a gunshot. I was back in my truck and driving away before the porch lights started coming on. Dwayne's Auto Repair had been my second home for 8 years. The garage sat on a corner lot downtown, surrounded by the kind of businesses that barely hung on: a pawn shop, a check cashing place, and a diner that served coffee strong enough to wake the comatose. Above the garage was a small apartment that Dwayne used for storage. 2 rooms, a bathroom, and a kitchenette that hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. It wasn't much, but it was mine for $50 a week. "You sure about this, Dave?" Dwayne stood in the doorway, his bulk blocking most of the morning light. He'd been running the garage since before I was born, and his face showed every year of dealing with broken engines and broken people. "It's temporary," I said, unpacking my clothes into a dresser that had seen better decades. "Just until I figure things out." "Your wife really think you made a move on that Hartwell woman?" "That's what she says," Dwayne snorted. "That woman's got more poison in her than a snake farm. Always stirring up trouble, acting like she's better than everyone else because she married some pretty boy with daddy's money." I'd always liked Dwayne's direct approach to character assessment. My phone rang. Frank's number. "I'm downstairs," he said. "We need to talk." Frank Morrison looked like what Central Casting would order for small-town private investigator. Rumpled clothes, 3 days of stubble, and eyes that had seen too much of the wrong side of human nature. He climbed the stairs to my apartment carrying a coffee and a manila folder. "Rough night?" he asked, taking in my accommodations. "I've had better." I gestured to the folding chair that served as my only furniture besides the bed. "What did you find?" Frank opened the folder and spread out several photographs on the dresser. "Your wife's been busy. These were taken yesterday afternoon, about 2 hours before she threw you out." The first photo showed Julia coming out of the Riverside Hotel downtown. The second showed Ethan Hartwell following her out about 10 minutes later. The third showed them in Ethan's BMW in the hotel parking lot, engaged in what could generously be called an intimate conversation. "How long?" I asked. "Based on what I could dig up in one night, at least 3 weeks, maybe longer." Frank pulled out another set of photos. "They've been meeting at the hotel every Tuesday and Thursday. Always the same routine. She goes in first, he follows. They leave separately." I studied the photos, feeling something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. "There's more," Frank continued. "I checked your joint bank account. She's been moved." Money. Small amounts, but consistent. Looks like she's building a nest egg. "How much?" "About 8,000 over the past month." all transferred to an account in her name only. I sat down on the bed, processing this information. Julia had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. The accusation about Melissa was just the excuse she needed to get me out of the house. What about Melissa? Where does she fit in? Frank shrugged. Could be she knows about the affair and is covering for your wife. Could be she's just stirring the pot for fun. That woman likes drama more than most people like breathing. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your wife's burning your stuff in the backyard. Melissa's here, laughing. I showed Frank the message. Probably that nosy neighbor of yours, he said. Mrs. Krantz, right? She's been watching your house like it's her personal soap opera. I stood up and walked to the small window that overlooked the street. Below, people went about their normal lives, buying groceries, walking dogs, pretending their marriages weren't falling apart. I want you to keep watching them, I told Frank. Document everything. Times, places, who they talk to. I want to know what they're planning. Dave, you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes it's better to just walk away, start over somewhere else. I turned back to him. They threw me out of my own house based on a lie. They're stealing my money and burning my possessions. Walking away isn't really an option anymore. Frank nodded slowly. All right, but we do this smart. No breaking laws, no doing anything that could come back on you legally. Understood. After Frank left, I sat alone in my apartment above the garage, listening to the sounds of the shop below. Dwayne was working on Mrs. Patterson's Buick, cursing at a stubborn bolt in 3 languages. Normal sounds, honest work. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Julia's boss at the boutique. Miranda Chen had always been friendly when I'd stopped by the store, and she struck me as the type who valued honesty above politics. Miranda? It's David, Julia's husband. I was wondering if we could have a conversation sometime about some concerns I have regarding the store's inventory and my wife's spending habits. A long pause. David, I think that might be a very good idea. Can you come by tomorrow after we close? I'll be there. The rest of the day passed slowly. I worked on a transmission rebuild, losing myself in the mechanical precision of gears and gaskets. There was something comforting about fixing things that were actually broken, where the problems had clear solutions. Around 5 o'clock, Dwayne knocked on my apartment door. You got a visitor? He said. Emma stood in the garage bay, looking uncertain and younger than her 19 years. My daughter had Julia's dark hair but my stubborn chin, and right now she looked like she was trying to solve a particularly difficult equation. Dad? Mom said you moved out. She said that you did something inappropriate. I hugged her, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. Your mother and I are having some problems, Em, but I want you to know that whatever she told you, I didn't do anything inappropriate with anyone. She seemed really upset, and Melissa was there, crying. I'm sure she was. I pulled back to look at my daughter's face. Emma, I need you to understand something. Sometimes people lie. Sometimes people you trust lie to you for reasons that have nothing to do with the truth. Are you saying Mom's lying? I'm saying the situation is complicated, and you shouldn't worry about it. This is between your mother and me. Emma nodded, but I could see the confusion in her eyes. She was old enough to sense that something was fundamentally wrong, but young enough to hope her parents could fix it. After she left, I sat in my apartment and made a list. Names, dates, bank account numbers, everything I could remember about the past few months. Patterns started to emerge. The late nights Julia claimed to be working inventory. The new clothes she said were samples from vendors. The way she'd started taking her phone with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. The signs had been there. I'd just been too trusting or too stupid to see them. My phone rang. Mrs. Krantz's voice whispery and excited. David, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the phone book. What can I do for you, Mrs. Krantz? I thought you should know. That Hartwell man has been at your house every day since you left. His car's there right now. Has been for 2 hours. I thanked her and hung up. Then I drove across town to the Riverside Hotel and waited in the parking lot until I saw what I expected to see. Julia's car pulling in, followed 10 minutes later by Ethan's BMW. Some patterns were harder to break than others. Frank's office smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. He'd decorated it with the kind of furniture you'd find at a going-out-of-business sale, and the motivational posters on the walls were so old they'd become ironic. Your wife's getting sloppy, he said, spreading new photographs across his desk. Yesterday, she didn't even bother with the hotel. They went straight to his house. The photos showed Julia's car in Melissa's driveway, then Julia and Ethan embracing in the doorway, in broad daylight, where any neighbor could see. Where was Melissa? Shopping trip to the city. Left at 9 in the morning, didn't get back until after 6. Convenient timing. I studied the photos, noting the timestamp. 2:30 in the afternoon on a Thursday when Julia was supposed to be working at the boutique. I talked to her boss yesterday, I told Frank. Miranda's been covering for Julia's absences, but she's getting tired of it. Apparently, Julia's been calling in sick or claiming family emergencies about twice a week for the past month. Frank leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously. So we've got adultery, theft, and job abandonment. What's your next move?
Your ex, the one you said you blocked, 300 messages this month.
He contacted me for—
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
I want to know more about Ethan, his background, his finances, what kind of man Melissa married. I can do that. Might take a few days. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. That evening, I drove past my old house. Julia's car was gone, but Ethan's BMW sat in the driveway like it belonged there. The lights were on in the living room, and I could see 2 figures moving around inside. I parked across the street and called Mrs. Krantz. I see you out there, she said before I could speak. Just checking on my property. That man's been there every night since Monday. Sometimes that Melissa woman comes by too. They sit around your kitchen table like they're planning something. Planning what? How should I know? But yesterday I saw them carrying boxes out to Melissa's car. Boxes from your garage. My tools. They were taking my tools. I thanked Mrs. Krantz and drove back to the garage, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. My workshop was in that garage. Thousands of dollars worth of equipment I'd collected over the years. Specialty wrenches, diagnostic computers, the pneumatic lift I'd saved 2 years to buy. The next morning I called my lawyer. Valerie Santos had handled the closing when Julia and I bought the house, and she'd always struck me as someone who didn't suffer fools gladly. David, I'm sorry to hear about your situation. What exactly do you need from me? I want to know my rights. The house is in both our names, but she's locked me out. She's also been transferring money from our joint accounts. Have you filed for divorce? Not yet. I wanted to understand the situation better first. Smart. Don't file until we've documented everything. In the meantime, I'll send a letter to Julia informing her that she cannot dispose of any marital property or continue transferring funds without your consent. What about my tools? They're taking things from the garage. I'll include that in the letter. And David? Start documenting everything. Times, dates, witnesses. If this goes to court, you'll want a paper trail. After talking to Valerie, I drove to the bank and moved half the remaining funds from our joint account to a new account in my name only. If Julia wanted to play financial games, she'd learn that 2 could participate. My phone rang as I was leaving the bank. Julia's number. What did you do? Her voice was tight with anger. I protected my interests, same as you've been doing. David, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand. You're right, it got out of hand when you threw me out based on a lie. It got worse when you started stealing from our joint account. I wasn't stealing. That money was for what? Hotel rooms? New clothes for your boyfriend? Silence on the other end. Julia, here's what's going to happen. I want my tools back in my garage by tomorrow night. I want you to stop transferring money. And I want the truth about what's really going on. Or what? Or you'll find out that I can play games too. And I'm better at it than you think. I hung up before she could respond. That afternoon, Frank called with information about Ethan Hartwell. Interesting guy, Frank said. Married Melissa 6 years ago, right after she inherited her parents' estate. Before that, he was working as a personal trainer, barely making enough to pay rent on a studio apartment. So he married money. Looks that way. But here's the interesting part. Melissa's been supporting him completely. He has no income, no job, no assets in his own name. Everything's hers. What's his background? High school dropout, couple of minor arrests for bar fights, nothing serious. But Dave, I found something else. He's been meeting with a divorce attorney. That stopped me cold. When? 3 times in the past 2 weeks. Always during the day. Always when Melissa was out of town or busy with her social commitments. The pieces were starting to fit together in a way I didn't like. Ethan wasn't just having an affair with Julia, he was planning to leave Melissa. And Julia, who'd been moving money and making plans, was probably going to leave me. They were planning to run off together. Frank, I need you to find out everything you can about that divorce attorney. Who's paying the bills? What kind of settlement Ethan might be expecting? Already on it. Should have answers by tomorrow. I spent that evening in my apartment, staring at the ceiling and thinking about 12 years of marriage. Julia and I had met in college, married young, struggled through my apprenticeship and her retail jobs. We'd bought the house together, painted every room, planted the garden in the backyard. When had it all gone wrong? When had she decided that what we'd built together wasn't enough? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your garage? I went downstairs and turned on the lights. My toolboxes were back, but something was wrong. Drawers had been opened and closed carelessly. Tools shoved back in the wrong places. Someone had been going through everything, looking for something. But what? Then I remembered the small fireproof safe. I kept bolted to the floor behind my workbench. Important papers, some cash, and a few other items I preferred to keep private. The safe was still there, still locked, but there were fresh scratches around the combination dial. Someone had tried to open it. I dialed the combination and checked the contents. Everything was still there, including the envelope I'd forgotten about until now. Insurance papers, birth certificates, and a USB drive containing every financial record, email, and document from our marriage. I'd started keeping digital copies of everything after a friend got cleaned out in his divorce. It had seemed like paranoia at the time. Now it looked like preparation. Frank's call came at 6 in the morning, which meant he'd been up all night digging through records. Dave, you need to hear this. That divorce attorney Ethan's been seeing? Julia's been paying the bills. I sat up in bed, instantly awake. What do you mean? I mean, she's been funding his divorce from Melissa. 3 payments of $1,500 each, all from that separate account she set up. The room felt like it was spinning slightly. So they're definitely planning to run off together? Gets worse. I tracked down the attorney's secretary, bought her a few drinks last night. Ethan's not just planning to divorce Melissa, he's going after half her assets, the house, the investments, everything her parents left her. Can he do that? Depends on how good his lawyer is and how much evidence he can present about his contributions to the marriage. But Dave, here's the kicker. Your wife's been helping him build that case. Frank explained that Julia had been documenting Melissa's spending habits, her social activities, even her drinking. They were building a case that Melissa was an unfit spouse who'd wasted marital assets. They're setting her up, I said. Looks that way. And once Ethan gets his settlement, he and Julia disappear, with both pots of money, his divorce settlement and whatever she's managed to hide from you. I got dressed and drove to the diner down the street, needing coffee and time to think. The morning crowd was the usual collection of shift workers and insomniacs, people who understood that sometimes life happened at inconvenient hours. My phone rang. Miranda from the boutique. David, I'm sorry to bother you so early, but I need to ask you something. Did Julia have permission to take inventory home? What kind of inventory? Children's clothes, mostly the expensive items. She said you were having money troubles and asked if she could buy some things at cost for your daughter. Emma was 19 and hadn't worn children's clothes in years. Miranda, I think you should check your inventory very carefully. And you might want to look at your books, too. A long pause. Oh, no. David, how bad is this? I don't know yet, but I think you should call your accountant. After hanging up, I sat in the diner booth and made a list of everyone Julia and Ethan had wronged or were planning to wrong. Me, Melissa, Miranda, probably others I didn't know about yet. What if they all knew the truth? I started with Miranda. She agreed to meet me that evening after the boutique closed, and she sounded worried enough to be receptive to whatever evidence I could provide. Next, I called Mrs. Krantz. I need a favor, I told her. You've been watching my house, and I appreciate that. But I need you to watch Melissa's house, too. Specifically, I need to know when she's home and when she's not. Why would I do that? Because Melissa's husband is stealing from her, and my wife is helping him do it. I think you'd want to know if someone was robbing your neighbor. Mrs. Krantz was quiet for a moment. That Melissa woman has always been snooty to me. Acts like I'm not worth talking to. So, this is your chance to return the favor. I'll call you if I see anything interesting. That evening, I met Miranda at the boutique. She'd spent the day going through her inventory and books, and her face told the story before she said a word. It's bad, David. Really bad. She showed me the numbers. Over the past 3 months, Julia had been systematically stealing merchandise and covering it up with fake sales entries. The total was close to $12,000. I trusted her, Miranda said. She's been with me for 4 years. I gave her keys, let her handle the deposits, even covered for her when she needed time off. I'm sorry, I had no idea. What should I do? Call the police? I thought about that. Let me ask you something first. Do you want justice or do you want your money back? Both, if possible. Then let's be smart about this. Don't call the police yet. Give me a few days to work something out. Miranda agreed reluctantly. As I was leaving, she handed me a folder. Copies of everything, she said, in case something happens to my records. I drove home thinking about leverage. Julia and Ethan thought they were so clever, manipulating everyone around them. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd hurt too many people, and eventually, those people would want revenge. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Krantz. Melissa just left. Big suitcase in her car. Looked like she was going somewhere for a few days. Perfect timing. I called Frank. How quickly can you get into Melissa's house? Dave, I can't break into someone's house. That's illegal. I'm not asking you to break in. I'm asking if you know anyone who might have legitimate access. A cleaning service, a repair company, someone with a key. Frank was quiet for a moment. Melissa uses Henderson's cleaning service. The owner, Pete Henderson, owes me a favor from when I helped him with a cheating employee. Think Pete would be willing to help expose someone who's been cheating his client? Depends on what kind of help you're talking about. The kind that involves a small recording device, in the right place, at the right time. Frank sighed. You're walking a fine line here, Dave. They crossed that line first. I'm just evening the odds. 2 hours later, Pete Henderson's van was parked in Melissa's driveway. Pete had been cleaning houses for 20 years and had developed a healthy dislike for people who treated service workers like furniture. When Frank explained that Melissa's husband was planning to cheat her out of everything she owned, Pete had been eager to help. The recording device was tiny, voice-activated, and completely untraceable. Pete placed it under the kitchen table where Melissa, Julia, and Ethan held their planning sessions. How long will the battery last? I asked Frank. About a week. Should be plenty of time to get what we need. That night, I lay in my apartment bed, listening to the sounds of the city settling down for the night. Somewhere across town, Julia was probably in my house with Ethan, making plans to disappear with other people's money. They thought they were so smart, so careful. They had no idea what was coming. My phone rang, Emma's number. Dad, I'm worried about Mom. She seems different, distracted. And there's this guy around all the time. What guy? Melissa's husband. He's always there when I call, always in the background. Mom says he's just helping with some repairs. But Dad, our house doesn't need repairs. I want you to be careful around your mother right now. Don't tell her we talked, and don't tell her anything about your plans or your money. Dad, you're scaring me. I don't mean to, just trust me on this, okay? Everything is going to work out, but right now, I need you to be smart. After Emma hung up, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. My daughter was starting to see through Julia's lies, which meant the facade was cracking. Soon, everyone would know the truth. The question was, what would I do with that truth when the time came? Frank called at 7 in the morning, his voice tight with excitement. Dave, you need to hear this. The recording device picked up a conversation last night. Julia, Ethan, and Melissa were all there. Melissa's back? Came home around midnight, and boy, did they have a lot to discuss. I met Frank at his office 20 minutes later. He had the digital recorder connected to a small speaker, and the sound quality was surprisingly clear. Melissa's voice came through first. I don't like this, Julia. David's not stupid. He's going to figure out what we're doing. David's a mechanic. Julia's voice dismissive. He fixes engines, not problems like this. Besides, it's too late to back out now. Ethan's voice joined in. The divorce papers are ready to file. Once I serve Melissa, we'll have maybe a week before she figures out how much I'm going after. What if she fights it? Melissa asked. She won't, Ethan said. Not once she sees the evidence Julia's been collecting. The spending records, the photographs from your girls' nights, the receipts from all those shopping trips. My lawyer says we can paint you as an alcoholic who's been wasting marital assets. There was a pause, then Melissa's voice smaller now. This feels wrong, Ethan. We've been married 6 years. And you've been treating me like your pet for 6 years, Ethan shot back. I'm tired of asking permission to spend my own money. Tired of pretending to care about your stupid social events. This is my chance to get what I deserve. Julia's voice. Once Ethan gets his settlement and I finish cleaning out David's accounts, we can disappear. I've been looking at properties in Florida. We could have a good life there. What about Emma? Melissa asked. What about her? She's in college. She doesn't need me anymore. This is my time. I felt something cold settle in my chest as I listened to my wife dismiss our daughter like an inconvenience. The recording continued for another 10 minutes with details about bank accounts, timeline for the divorce, and plans for liquidating assets. Bye.